Welcome to Fair and Square. Our guest today is Dr. Guneeta Singh Bhalla, founder of 1947 Partition Archive. Dr. Guneeta is spearheading a campaign to record eyewitness accounts of the 1947 partition. You are recording these amazing stories of people who witnessed the 1947 partition, and you're archiving them also. Before we move on to your work, please introduce yourself and your work.
So I'm a physicist by profession. I recently completed my postdoc in physics at the University of California in Berkeley. And now what we're doing is I'm basically working as a volunteer currently to archive these stories.
Where did this idea come from?
I grew up in a family that was a migrant family. So my grandmother told me the story of their migration and from Lahore to Delhi. So I sort of grew up knowing that my father's side of my family had migrated, and I know that we didn't really learn about it in school very much. I grew up in India. First 10 years of my life were here. We moved around a lot because my father was in the army, and eventually we moved to the United States. So in high school there, we learn a lot about Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and we learn a lot about the Holocaust in Europe, but no one ever touched upon partition. It was not even mentioned in our textbooks. I know that things are a little bit different in some places, but at least where I went to school in Florida, it was not in our textbooks, and that really bothered me. So over the years, I had been thinking about it for years and years. Part of my PhD program, I was in I was in Tokyo in Japan, and I took a trip down to Hiroshima, and there I came across the witness archives that they have. And I was pretty blown away by how powerful it was to hear the stories directly from the storytellers, from the people who experienced the events. And that was the moment that I realized that that's how we need to tell the story of partition. And of course, I did my research at the time and I could not find anything such that existed for partition. And I felt a great urgency to change that.
So what you record is called oral history. What exactly does it mean?
In this case, it's a little bit different than any normal interview in that you're trying to empower the storyteller. You ask open-ended questions. There's a whole sort of methodology to it that I had to learn. I had to teach myself. And of course, now we work with advisors who are seasoned oral historians who basically teach us the proper...
So about how many people have you chronicled till now?
We have a little over 700 interviews so far.
From what time to what time?
At a hobby level, it started for me, I don't want to say hobby level, at a sort of informal level, it started for me in 2009. And we turned it into an organization in 2011. So that's when we...
So what's the organization called?
The 1947 Partition Archive. So since those very early days up through today, it's a little over 700.
So are your stories only based out of Punjab, or it's spread out?
All the way from Afghanistan to Burma.
Can you share some journey?
I have not been to Bengal, but we work in a large team. There's a whole bunch of us doing this. So we've got stories all the way from what used to be called the Northwest Frontier Province area at that time, the time of partition, to Assam, and from Kashmir to all the way to the Tamil areas.
So, and how many men and women?
Almost equal, but definitely more men than women. It just so happens that women are a little bit shy, and just more men
so
than women.
how do you plan to take it forward?
We are looking to collect 10,000 stories, and the way that we do this is we empower anybody who wants to do this. So there's no barrier. So anyone, anywhere that wants to collect a story, we offer free online workshops so people can log in through our website, take these free workshops, learn how to collect the stories, and submit them. And so people have done this so far from 9 different countries. And
so there's a methodology involved?
There's a methodology involved,
okay.
Yeah. But the idea is that we want this to really be an archive that's powered by citizens.
But just explain the methodology, how you use volunteers, how they move about.
There's a lot of freedom and self-motivation involved. All we do is we provide the training on how to collect these stories. We provide the support. And at times, we also match people up. Like we match up people we call citizen historians. These are people that have trained with us on how to collect these stories. We match them up with people who've signed up to share their story. Now, if someone has a story to share, they can easily sign up through our website as well. And citizen historians are people who've taken our online training and have gone out and collected stories and submitted them. And so really there's a lot of freedom on how they choose to do this, but we do have a format.
Is there a set format? Yeah.
There is a set format that we ask people to follow, and it legitimizes.
Which kind of includes?
So it's a life story shaped by partition. We're not just looking at partition, we're looking at pre-partition lifestyles. That's really important. It's sort of a lost cultural history. We look at what languages they spoke in school, what their school was like, what their house was like, what the general environment was like, festivals and everything, sort of an ethnography of.
So is there a particular language that is followed, or whichever the language?
Whatever language. We have, I think, 8 or 9 languages currently in the archive.
So you must be having Kashmiri, you must be having Bengali, you must be having Punjabi, Pashto.
I think
Persian.
We do have some Pashto, right?
From where are you getting the support? Is there a financial model?
It's donation-based currently.
Right.
And we've had about 300 individuals from around the world, just ordinary people who've contributed to the archive.
So are more organizations joining in to give you support?
We have a lot of partner organizations, yes, definitely. So a lot of partners, we've got legal firms, we've got accounting firms that have come on board. We're partnering with education organizations, schools that want to teach children how to do this.
So what started as a spark to chronicle a story has become this big?
Yeah, I suppose, yeah.
What are the main challenges when you undertake this kind of work? Are people forthcoming? Are they shy initially?
We work with people who are interested in sharing their story. And so we never force anybody to share their story. So I think the biggest challenge probably right now is time. We really feel that we're losing our stories pretty fast right now, losing our history very fast, and we're just trying to go out there as fast as possible. And of course, trying to gather resources, as a
because it's
new organization.
Because people must be very old.
Definitely.
Share some of the stories that have left an impact on you, because there are all kinds of stories of human tragedy.
I think really have been very difficult to even collect. For example, a gentleman in California who was orphaned. He migrated from Ludhiana district to Lahore, actually Kasur, during partition. And he was orphaned by a mob. So he was the sole survivor, and that's because somebody in the mob decided to adopt him temporarily. But his whole village was massacred. Stories like that, and then having to grow up in a very difficult life as basically an orphan in this new place that he didn't know, and by extended family. So I think stories like that are sort of very difficult to record, and then it kind of blows your mind that by no fault of his own he ended up in this situation.
What sort of an impact do they leave on you? I mean, are you shaken? Do you keep thinking about them for days? Do you sleep well?
I mean, absolutely. This particular interview was done over a year ago, and I'm still thinking about it. No, they're definitely very impressionable. One thing they make you realize is, the problems that you have in our modern life, they're kind of pretty insignificant compared to some of the triumphs that the individuals who've gone through partition and rebuilt their life, what they've gone through, they really make you, they're pretty amazing.
The people you interview, do they have a very strong religious bias? Because obviously it was done on very, very strong religious basis. Mm-hmm. So do you feel that generation, or the people affected by 1947, have a stronger bias than the second generation or the third generation that would have come in by now?
There are certainly people who have a bias, but for the large part, and this was quite surprising to me from the interviews that I've done. Now, I have not analyzed all 700 of our interviews because I don't speak all the languages, but from the interviews that I've conducted, I would say that mostly it's the opposite. There's not as much bias because we're talking about individuals who grew up in a time where they were not segregated by religion, and religion was something that was in the home, and they were living in this sort of multifaceted society, and people were functioning together in the society, and it was surprisingly low.
There's a huge time gap There must be some discrepancies that would have come in terms of memory or this thing. How do you account that, or you don't? You vet them at a certain level?
In terms of wedding, I think usually if they're at least 8 or 9 years old at the time of partition, they have a pretty good memory. Sometimes people as young as 5 have really good memories as well. In terms of discrepancies, yeah, we don't do anything to account for that. But one of the things that I've noticed is that even if people have a bad memory of more recent things, even patients who have Alzheimer's, they'll tend to remember partition incredibly well. I think it's just memory that's been etched really deeply in the mind.
So have you also met political survivors in terms of that, people who were in politics at that point in time? They must be having their own point of view on the matter.
Absolutely. So people who were politicians at that time, they were usually in an age group where they would be probably far too old today.
Yes.
So I don't think we have interviewed too many individuals, at least I personally have not, who were politicians at that time. But individuals who are politicians today, sure, we're open to stories from everybody. So.
But then have you thought about chronicling our Indian Prime Minister? His family was there.
Absolutely.
Then Pervez Musharraf, the former president of Pakistan, his family was in India. And Nawaz Sharif.
If they're interested in contributing their story to this history, I think it would be fantastic.
So who's the oldest person you've chronicled so far? I remember you, in the sense you just mentioned that you went to Gurdaspur and people were there, 100-year-old guys there.
Absolutely. I think the oldest person we have archived is 109.
He beats Safoja Singh.
Yeah, I was quite surprised. Right. I was recently traveled to district Gurdaspur, and it was very shocking. People live to be well over 100, and they have very healthy lifestyles, and they remember
They
that
remember
time
everything?
Period. Yeah.
Absolutely. So what did this 109-year-old man share?
He was 40, around 40 years old at the time of partition. And what he shared was fascinating. So he was a tailor then, and he's a tailor to this day. He still sews, and it's his passion, his life passion. And he was telling us about a time when they lived in these villages where the economy was completely all enclosed. They made their own clothes, they made their own food, everything happened in the village. And people were, they had a diverse range of caste and religious backgrounds, but everybody functioned together and as a unit, at least in his village. And he told us about a time when all the food was organic. They were all very healthy, and getting sick was not sort of the norm. And it was very fascinating to hear about that time. And during partition, they migrated in a kafla. So his son was in his 70s today, and he shared his perspective. So while the father was going around on horseback patrolling the kafla, the son remembers being in one of the ox carts.
When in hindsight, what do they say? Was partition a good idea? They're well off now. What is their opinion?
The opinion varies across the board. It really depends, I think, on your experience from that time.
Maybe region, if you're in Bengal, the opinion would be something else, or maybe if you're in Afghanistan.
I think, we've had similar opinions from different communities, Bengal and Punjab, and we've had different opinions within the same community. So I think it really varies. In general, most people agree that the way it happened, it should not have happened that way, even if it were to happen. Now, a lot of people believe it should not have happened. Others believe that it was a positive thing. But I think a vast majority of most people agree that it should not have unfolded the way it did.
Was it avoidable? A lot of people, do they think that way?
A lot of people think that if certain things from the leadership had happened differently, that a lot of the violence could have been avoided. That's what I've heard from
So
the
have you
stories.
also chronicled any person of eminence, in the sense that the 47 partition came into limelight again with Milkha Singh, the biopic on Milkha Singh, Bhag Milkha Bhag. So have you interviewed Milkha Singh?
We would love to interview Milkha Singh if he would be willing to contribute his story. But I think a number of individuals, some that you'll recognize, like a person that you share your name with, author Kushwant Singh,
right,
author
yes.
of Train to Pakistan, author of Cracking India or Ice Candy Man, that's Dr. Bapsi Sidhwa. So there's a number of individuals that we've chronicled. Like I said, the archive is really open to anybody.
So does it bring an intellectual wealth also along? I mean, they think they have a perspective to it, or they are also just random stories like which follow your format?
They're within the format, but most certainly. So we try to absolutely. There's a wealth of intellectual reflection, not just from them, from many individuals. Sometimes even from individuals who are perhaps don't have a formal higher education and live in the villages, and will have some very fascinating sort of viewpoints.
But when you chronicle these stories, when you listen to people, do you ever think that what made people turn savage overnight?
What's fascinating to me is when we first started this work, I had also gone in thinking that people sort of just randomly just turned on each other overnight. Now, when things got really bad, I think it did get to that point, but from what I've learned from the interviews is that most people did not turn on each other. In fact, most people helped each other. What happened was that you had sort of, gunde kehne hain aapa Punjabi, it's like gangs of young people who, as things got worse, became even more empowered. So I think the motivation, as I've been told by people over and over, was to loot. It was an economically driven.
So chor uchakke, they took over.
Yeah, so when there was no more police, the police was being divided, the military was being divided, then all these when the social structure fell apart, the violence kind of went out of control. It was a time to sort of, if you have a landlord that you don't like, to turn against your landlord. If you want to rob a shop, it was the time to go in.
ਜਦੋਂ ਲੋਗ ਆਪਣੀ stories narrate ਕਰਦੇ ਨੇ.
ਹਾਂਜੀ.
So does it heal them?
Definitely, I think it's cathartic for many people. We've had people share their stories for the first time with us. Their families also did not know. And I think there's a very huge healing element for people to be able to tell their stories. We've been told over and over again, and it's very empowering to us when we interview somebody and
So maybe they've not shared it, उन्होंने अपने बच्चों नाल भी ना share कीती होवे कहानी, but you become the first point for them to kind of express it. Is it a closure?
I imagine that for some it may be a form of closure.
The political leadership of that time, for different people, different leaders meant different things, Like, do people share this, that for example, what was Gandhi's role, what was Jinnah's role, what was Nehru's role?
Certainly. People who were familiar with the politics of the time do share those views. There was people who were completely unfamiliar with those politics, and so they generally don't have viewpoints to share. But the views are very diverse. It would be hard for me to really just pinpoint one viewpoint and represent that.
But for example, people, in the sense that because you're dealing directly with people who are affected or witness to the partition, what do they think about Gandhi, for example?
They're very diverse. There's people who have immense respect, and there's others who feel things could have been done differently. So I think, very diverse viewpoints.
In your schooling, you also studied the Jewish Holocaust. So what sort of similarities or differences can you draw from this carnage and what happened with the Jews?
Now, the Holocaust I've studied not as a researcher, but more as just any other person. I learned about it in school, I've read books. I would say that obviously with any human tragedy, you're going to have a lot of similarities. You'll have individuals who helped each other. You'll have a lot of personal reflection. You'll have times when people were forced to do things that they would normally not do and behave in ways that they normally would not. And then some of the differences are that I think in the Holocaust it's a very clear it was a genocide. It was a top-down sort of genocide.
Right.
The partition was not a genocide. It was more of a communal violence. It was not sort of top-down. It was within the community. So that's a huge difference.
Since you're meeting these families also, do you find these families much more resilient in their approach than the average family which hasn't been through such a tragedy or such an event?
I would say the individuals who've gone through it. Definitely, I have been amazed by the resilience. That is definitely true. I've met individuals who've also, become NRIs. They've migrated out of South Asia, and they seem to, it's very easy for them to build a new life because they've had to do it before for partition.
Did you come across people, who've been affected more than once? After the partition, somewhere else there were riots or some other political upheaval. Have you come across such people also?
Many, yeah. We've come across people who experienced the bombing, I believe in the early 40s, the Japanese bombing in Burma. They've had to leave and migrate to the Calcutta area, or what's in Bangladesh today. And then they've had to migrate again during partition, going one or the other direction. And then, of course, there's 1984. There's people who migrated.
So for some, 1947 was a second or a third experience.
Yeah, or
right.
Yeah, exactly.
Not the first.
Yeah.
And for some, it was the first, and then
later
on.
migrations.
But out of the people you archived, obviously, we all agree that people are old. So how many would have died by now?
So we don't maintain any exact count of that, but from the people that at least I've interviewed about 100, like I've said. And from those individuals, there's definitely a good number that have passed on. There's about 15 to 20 individuals.
So you need to really hurry and get going. What kind of impact will your work leave in terms of your recording oral history and then archiving it? Obviously, it will manifest in many ways. So what do you think, what role will your work play in years to come?
We plan to function as an archive, a sort of source of information that can be used by historians, the general public to come and learn from firsthand accounts, used by filmmakers, authors, and any other media makers for educational purposes. In addition, we do want to push for K through 12 education around the world. This was a global event that did change the way that our world is and into what it is today. And just like everybody learns about Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and the Holocaust and other events.
So ਤੁਸੀਂ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹੋ ਕਿ syllabus switch ਹੋਵੇ universities ਜਾਂ schools ਵਿੱਚ abroad?
ਹਾਂਜੀ, definitely. Syllabus ਹੋਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੈ. And
so have you taken a step in that direction as yet?
No, right now we are very focused on archiving the stories. This is more of a future goal.
How has the social media helped you? Are you using it very effectively?
We're using social media very extensively. It's sort of the way to spread message in this modern day. So what we do is with social media, it's very simple. We share the stories that are coming into the archive. And the conversations that unfold are always really fascinating. People from, across the borders of South Asia, all having this one platform where they can sort of communicate with one another, and it's very positive.
But when you go to people, are there some very horrible stories in terms of, like, for example, some people just staying in some old age homes or still in some shelter homes?
Yes. In Dhaka, there are still refugee camps, and there are still people from the time of partition who are living in these refugee camps in Bangladesh.
How are they surviving? I mean, what's their life?
I haven't gone there, but there's definitely interviews that have come in from there, and the conditions are they're poverty level conditions. These are very densely populated refugee camps, similar to a slum.
Better late than never, but do you think that this thought should have come to you a little bit earlier? Do you regret that?
Should I regret not being born earlier? I mean, there's others. I guess we're amazed, those of us who are working on this, that it was not done at a huge level, at the level that it should have been done before we were around, before our days.
So how's your university supporting you?
So the University of California in Berkeley is providing office space for us currently. We're in their Startup Accelerator program.
You are working with an international community, more with Americans. How is the international community viewing your work?
I would say that it's been viewed, there's been a lot of encouragement from the community, and people are fascinated by the fact that they don't know about this, that it was such a massive global event. So many people were affected, yet it's hardly known in terms of even the modern South Asians. We may know about it in passing, but we don't know about it to the extent that we should know about it.
Guneeta, before going, I want you to share a story of hope. I've been impacted by this whole story of yours. So please leave us with a story of hope, a story where the human spirit triumphed.
I'll go back to that one story I was talking about earlier, where this gentleman who was orphaned, he was from a village in Ludhiana, and it's a very touching story where the assassin takes the child. He was an 8-year-old child at the time, and he has no idea what's going on. He's just seen his family get murdered, and the assassin takes the child with him, and they walk for 2 days and 2 nights He's turned over to a family, he's adopted, and I believe his religion has changed for a little while until eventually he is discovered by the military, who takes him to Pakistan. And there he lives in a refugee camp for a month or two. He doesn't know anybody, he doesn't talk to anybody. So imagine this 8-year-old boy in a refugee camp. He doesn't know anybody, far away from his family, and he's got this memory of what happened to his family, and he survived somehow.
And what does he do now?
So today he has a gas station in California, and he's doing really, really well. So it's quite a tale of triumph of how someone like him overcame that. And he's even had a robbery in the gas station where he was shot several times, but he survived. But the thing is that he said he was not afraid at all because he had been shot at several times during partition.
Thank you.
ਖਬਰਾਂ ਦੀ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਓ, ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਕਦੇ ਵੀ ਤੇ ਕਿਤੋਂ ਵੀ ਜੁੜੋ। ਆਪਾਂ ਮਿਲਾਂਗੇ ਫੇਸਬੁੱਕ ਤੇ, ਅਸੀਂ ਦਿਖਾਂਗੇ YouTube ਤੇ, ਸਾਨੂੰ ਫੋਲੋ ਕਰੋ ਟਵਿੱਟਰ ਤੇ। ਖਬਰਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਜੁੜੇ ਰਹੋ ਦਿਨ ਰਾਤ।